Hello, it's so nice to see all of you or meet you. I'm Renee Seltzer, and we're going to start covering how to crush your budget. So, super excited you're here. And in this presentation, we're not going to only cover budget, but we're also going to cover ways to kind of think about your strategy and how to get away from being tactical into being strategic. So, we're going to cover so much. The beauty of this is that the event is recorded. So, we're going to send out a replay at the end of it too, in case you miss anything. But even more than missing anything, it's really about sharing this with your different team members because that helps you level set. It really is a great webinar to share with a CFO or CEO to really help say, hey, this is what other people are spending in their budget. This is ways to try to get more resources for your group. So it's a great level setting event. So stay with me. You're also going to get some freebies at the end. So really excited that you're here. All right, so just a little housekeeping. The webinar, as I mentioned, is being recorded. We'll send you out the slides and all participants are muted, but please do type in your questions. We have different panelists that are here to answer your questions, and then we can have some Q&A at the end. So please do ask questions as they go. A little bit about me. I'm Renee Seltzer. I've been doing marketing for over 20 years. I don't even want to say how many more years than 20. I have a digital agency, Ellis & Ellery Consulting, and we also do fractional CMO services. So right now I'm the fractional CMO for the University of Arizona Global Campus and a couple SaaS companies. And then I have 3 wonderful children who are super patient with me as I work through different marketing challenges for clients. So in this agenda, we're going to cover so much and it's going to feel like you're drinking from a fire hose. But these are kind of the overreaching topics that we're going to cover is changes in buyer behavior, your planning process, budgeting philosophies. And this is different ways to look at your budget, ways, what to consider adding to your budget. We don't want to do let's just use the same budget we used for last year, because I promise you're probably going to actually be even harder to get the same results if you did exactly what you did last year, because costs on Facebook and Google and all those things are going up. And then the equivalent of that is if you're getting a lot of referrals, then that would even that out. We're going to go through at the very end some benchmarks of what other people are spending their money on. And that's really good. So if you want to, stay through the end, but once you get to the benchmark part, if you feel like your business is underspending in some of these categories, that's a really good data point to bring back to your CFO or CEO, or just in general, whoever is manager of the budgets, and say, look, this is what other people are spending. So it's really, really important to show benchmarks. And then, like I said, we'll have Q&A time. Budgeting, right? This is a lot of how we feel. The last 2 years have been incredibly rough, and it's hard to think about next year. We just all are thinking about, like, how do we get to Thanksgiving? How do we get to Christmas? How do we just kind of end the year? And it's really hard to think about what's next for next year, right? It's how do we change things around? What we're doing right now isn't working very well, and it's exhausting, and there's a lot of trauma that we're kind of shaking off on top of it. One thing is everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. That whole adage, you plan, God laughs. This is where you're going to create a plan and things are going to go wrong. So it's good to kind of build some of that into the plan. And also I'm going to share some philosophies on thinking about a strategic plan, but then also going at it with quarterly sprints. So that way you can go ahead and account for these punches in the face that inherently happen in business. Budget is more than a series of numbers. It is an embodiment of our values. And this is where we have to ask ourselves, what are our values as an institution, and how does our budget support those values? And it's a tough conversation sometimes because values can be said and they come off across like platitudes. So if you really do feel like you have a sense of values in your organization, you got to put money towards those values and show that you support them. Otherwise, they really are just platitudes. And this is something that this is going to be an overarching part of the conversation today, is tactics without strategy is just the noise before defeat. It's from The Art of War. Great. It's like a super small book, but a great book. In my 20 plus years, I worked in tons of universities and businesses. And you really kind of see that a lot of people are working really hard. They're very busy. But what happens is we get so busy that we don't think macro trends. We don't see how the pieces of the organization fit together because we're just kind of busy with our head down in our worlds and our silos. So this is kind of where we're going to take that big overarching, how do we become strategic in our planning? Be data informed with your budgets, right? That's not just pulling reports, but it's really understanding. We take a kind of a step back, and it says, be careful not to artificially throttle down the results of poor budgeting. As an agency owner, I see a lot of times people come to me and they're like, I want to spend $5,000 in SEO. And because that was a line item in a budget, right? But if you take a step back and say, what if we did more money in SEO, could we get a lot more results from that? So we really have to kind of go back at it from not line items in a budget, but if we spent more, especially on channels that we think work really well for us, could we get a lot more? Are you artificially throttling down your results, right? Like this girl going down on a bike. Is this kind of what you're doing because you said, oh, we spent 5,000 last year on SEO, we should spend $5,000 this year again on SEO. But you have to look at it critically. What could I spend on SEO, or what could I spend on certain channels to truly accelerate growth and scale? So that's what we have to kind of think about when we're thinking about budgets. And then we start to put those line items in, right? So we got to kind of think of it that way. But don't artificially throttle down your results because you put the wrong dollar amount to an initiative. So buyer behavior across the board is changing, right? We definitely COVID has sped that up, but the majority of buyers now prefer to discover the value of a product or service on their own. They don't want to sit on your demo. They don't want to talk to your salesperson. So what is a business to do when they don't want to do that? We have to adjust our tactics and strategy all the way across the board. So it doesn't, like, they prefer to find the value. We have to make our websites 24 hours conversion selling machines. And, a part of that is that we then have to account for that. So like 80% of sales cycles happens in a digital or remote setting. So that means the person is already deciding if they want to learn more about your product before they get on a demo. They're already pre-sold by the time they get on the demo. That's why you have such good conversion rates by the demo. But we have to get more people engaged and interested to get to that point, right? And that's where marketing has to take on a much bigger lift in your 2022 plan. What can we do to encourage more people to get on the phone, to engage, to make them more buyer ready? And I have some other stats about that in a few moments. So stick with me on those stats. Now that we have to think about, how do we modernize your sales process, rewrite those playbooks, measure key metrics a different way, and stay ahead of trends and adjust your mindset around what really good marketing looks like. So if you don't build that into your plan right now, you're not going to have time or effort or money to do it this year. So you have to build in, we're going to modernize our sales process. And what does that look like? And how does marketing support sales or enrollment, whatever, that looks for you, right? So we're going to talk about like sales enablement materials. And I actually think of it as buyer enablement. How are we enabling the buyer to buy? How are we making them smarter? How are we giving them value? All right, would it be amazing if we had like a money machine just like this, right? Like, oh, I would love it. Money and time are going to be a constraint. Even if you're somebody like Coca-Cola, right? You're thinking, okay, well, money really isn't the constraint. Well, it is in time, because you only have so many resources. Even if you use 50 agencies, eventually you just kind of max out on how you could absorb it all. So you're always going to have some form of constraints in how you do your planning. One of the important things to kind of think about with your budget planning is, before you even start, you have to align with business goals, right? Drive more sales from your website could be a possible business goal. But what are some of your other business challenges? If you start to think, instead of doing an Excel spreadsheet with like line items and saying, okay, this is how much we want to spend on creative, this is how much we want to spend on, that becomes very myopic in your planning process. You got to think, what are we driving to? What are we trying to solve for? And then we pull the people in together, and how does each department solve for that problem? And how does that tie up? That's the through line. You solve for business problems instead of just thinking about dollars in Excel spreadsheets, right? So some of the business problems might be lead generation or conversion or retention, maybe brand reputation. Before you can even do those things, maybe you have a real bad brand reputation issue, and you have to overcome that. That's an objective. That's a business problem, because everything else, it's just going to be a leaky bucket if you can't solve for that one. And then there's other things, right? So you got to really figure out, what are the business problems that you're solving for, and that your budget should solve for those things. Not specifically each department comes up with a budget in a silo, which I often see. That's the beauty of having an agency and also being a CMO at companies, in their companies, is that I get to see both sides of the world and have a different perspective on how each side thinks about their world. Rowing harder doesn't help if the boat is heading in the wrong direction. And that happens so often. Everyone really means well, and they're working really hard, but they're not aligned to goals. And they're each kind of working through what they think is potentially the focus areas of the business. But we have to get alignment on what the focus is, so we're all kind of going in the same direction. 61% of marketers rank lead generation as their number one challenge. And I bet you a lot of you on the phone, feel free in the chat to share if that's one of your biggest challenges organizationally. But let's have a couple caveats to that. 79% of leads don't turn into sales. So that's bananas. But this is one of the main reasons, and I'll actually speak to this in a second, is only 1 to 3% of buyers are ready to buy right now. Our entire sales process is based on the lead comes in, the salesperson calls twice, even though at least 3 times is the magic number. And I have this amazing tip sheet on sales strategy. You can send me an email at the end of this, or just reply back to one of the emails we've sent you. But I'll send that to you. But one of the things is our salespeople usually only call twice. We don't have lead nurturing set up. So our entire process is about just targeting that 1 to 3% of our leads that are really ready to buy now. And good salespeople, well, they can get it to 11% conversions based on that. Only 3% are ready to buy. So some people we could kind of finagle into buying right now. The rest of it, what happens? Nothing. They just kind of become dead, dormant leads. This is why it's so incredibly imperative to budget for lead nurturing and sales enablement and all of these other things to make so when that 97% of people are ready to buy, you have kept up with a relationship with them over time. 95% of organizations have increased their digital marketing budgets in recent years, and 9 out of 10 expect it will continue growing. So hopefully your budget wasn't the same as it is for 2022 as it is for 2021. So if not, this is where you kind of roll that back up to your CFO or CEO and say, hey, we need more money. Okay, so now we're getting to budgeting, where to actually start when it comes to the budgeting process. That was some kind of background to think about while you're doing your budgeting process. At the end of this webinar, you're going to get access to a free template to download. So this has 8 different sheets, and I'll show you at the end what it looks like, but it has things for paid media and organic and content strategy and video strategy. So it has different elements for you to make it a little bit easier. All right, so strategic budget planning. You have to understand the institutional business priorities. So if you're a university, or if your president of the college might say institutionally, we want more inclusion. They might say we have a couple different programs. We're acquiring a different campus. Whatever their priorities are, we have to align marketing goals to your CEO or president's priorities. You got to align also to a roadmap, and I'll have a couple questions for your roadmap in just a second. You definitely have to identify what's worked in the past, right? And I have a little thing that says with Google, do no harm. You really want to identify what has worked so you can do more of that, and then reserve extra budget to do new things. What are your competitors doing? And you got to decide on the channels and create quarterly plans and 30-day sprints. So we'll cover all of that. Marketing needs to better understand the business roadmap, right? So like right here, do you have product launches coming? Do you have deals and promotions? What big product or events do you have coming up? Are you going to conferences? Do you have mergers, acquisitions, branding changes? You got to try to get that. And I know sometimes CEOs can be a little bit secretive, especially if there's like an acquisition coming or a merger. So what you can do, the way that you can overcome that, is maybe just asking, hey, is there anything, I know you can't always share something that we should earmark for in our budget, and then we just don't put a name for it. We call it miscellaneous. And that way they could still be secretive if they need to, but we go ahead and put some budget so we don't have to take budget from other things later in the year, which makes it really, really challenging for us to accomplish our goals. Before you set your budget, make sure your company's aligned on, again, what are the priorities for the business? What initiatives are marketing expected to support? Maybe they're not expected to support all of those initiatives. They probably should be, but it's good to vet that out. All right, you got to sit down, turn off distractions, pull reports, and reflect. And this is really hard to do in today's day and age because the average professional sends 120 emails a day and attends 62 meetings a month. And I would say some of you probably attend even more meetings than that. It's, we don't get paid to write emails or attend meetings, but that is what we spend the majority of our day doing. We don't do deep work anymore. It's kind of bouncing from one meeting to the other. So it makes it really hard to reflect. And I'm going to go through a lot of reflection right now because that's a key part of how to think about last year to next year. You got to be deliberate. You got to let your mind wander. So as a consultant, I have this real big advantage. This quote right here says, you don't need time to have a breakthrough idea. You need space. And space means that you need to be in a quiet space. You need to be away from distractions, and you need to let your mind wander. And that's really hard to do in an office setting or with, when you're back meetings. You don't have that space to do that. And you got to start asking yourself, and questioning assumptions, like, why did we do that? And that's something like a 5-year-old asks 1,000 times a day. And as we get older, we don't ask that. Like they've done some psychology testing, and adults don't ask the why anymore. You can't like uncover new ideas and inefficiencies if you don't think about them, right? You got to start observing, where can this process be better? How can we make it better, right? We spend all of our time doing. We can't like learn and observe from others in different departments too, because we don't have the time for it. We're not going to be able to see macro trends or how the pieces fit together if we don't take the time to do it. So really, really important. We have to clear our decks. So we have this on our Instagram. It's really funny. This is Pete Davidson from SNL, and he's asking him like, how are you doing, man? And he's like, not good, not good. So definitely check that out. It's really funny. But you have to reflect, and you have to reflect on last year and the year before, even if they're really tough to reflect on, right? We're not going to feel good about it, but we have to question assumptions, reflect, and really kind of get in the mindset of being strategic, right? So marketing budgets, these are all things that they need to include. So a lot of times we forget to include payroll. We forget to include like freelancing costs sometimes because we don't know what we don't know. Like we don't know we're going to hire a videographer later in the year, you know, but we have to make sure that we're not just thinking advertising budget, right? We got to think about, are we spending enough on personas? I often get customers who don't want to spend money on personas, and because they just want to get to it, I need leads. But we don't know if we're talking to the right people, and you have to have personas that are different for your buyer's journey. So let's say you're a B2B business. You might be optimizing, you could be talking to an HR person, a CEO person, and an engineer differently. And you really have to understand what resonates with them, what doesn't resonate with them, right? So it's really important that we kind of get to that core by doing customer interviews. And the only way that you're going to get customer interviews done is if you budget for them, right? They're expensive, and it takes time and space for that too. So and then also there's also all these extra costs that come up throughout the year that we just didn't think to put in our budget. Well, nothing halts productivity like making like a request to your CFO for more money. It's awkward. They always say no. And if not, you're really kind of just fighting the good fight to get that. So if you can try to put that in now and fight right now while they're thinking of budgets, it's better than trying to do it in June. Lots of times we hear things like, oh, this is a great idea, but we don't have the budget for it. So I'm going to share a lot of great things to consider. Try to fight for those things in your budget so you don't have to have those like awkward June conversations, or just say, oh, we can't do lead nurturing because we didn't budget for it. I'm going to show you why lead nurturing is one of those things you have to budget for. You got to tweak your perspective, right? Hold your horses. You got a time to reflect. In addition to the assets and allies, so you got to get input from others, but you really have to get people on your side. You're likely to have like negative feedback on some of your ideas. People aren't, the first time people hear something, they don't like jump aboard. So you really have to do some pre-work to start to get buy-in before you present your plan. If you just put a whole bunch of new things in your plan and you haven't paved the way to get input from others, they're going to want to poo-poo your idea. So how to allocate budget for digital marketing. Okay, so this is where we're starting to think about goals, right? SMART goals. SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. All of your goals in some way need to tie up to that. And it's hard to do, things like thought leadership. Well, how is it time bound? But you can go ahead and add how many pieces of thought leadership are you going to do? What do you think you might get from that? But it's definitely an arc where it takes it's a slow drift of seeing results for those things, but incredibly important. So it's really important that you tie in. If you don't have metrics from the last few years, now is the time that you budget to make sure that you have the right metrics moving forward. I often hear from so many companies that we don't have access to our data because the student, let's say in higher ed, the student journey goes from multiple systems. Tell your IT person if this is the case and you cannot unify data, which I hear across all kinds of businesses, call them today and say, I need a unique identifier from the moment that person becomes a lead all the way through them becoming a customer. So it's one unique identifier that gets passed from system to system with that person. And that is how you unify data. It's amazing how many companies don't do that. Or they're just having this epiphany now. I'm like, yes, a unique identifier. And that is how you connect them all. You might have to do it like outside and pivot tables and things like that, but you need a unique identifier. So you saw that. And then we're going to talk about quarterly roadmaps to focus on agility, right? You don't want to set up a plan that is so stringent that by, October, it just doesn't make any sense anymore. So you do want to look at them in quarterly sprints. But this is that one step. What I just mentioned before is If you go to a planning meeting and you present your plan, there's a good chance it's going to be denied. So I'm going to walk you through some strategies on how to get your plan approved, right? You got to think about it strategically, but you got to play the game. First, if you're developing a strategy, do not unveil it in the strategy meeting. That meeting is a ratification meeting. That means everybody has bought into it and they're just here to say, yes, I approve of it, right? That might sound counterintuitive, but the savviest professionals understand that meetings are just presentations. They're not up for discussions most of the time. So you have to get people aboard, right? Oh, blank slide. The real work takes place beforehand, systematically briefing key people to their input and feedback and addressing any concerns that might come up. You have to play the game and you have to have a lot of meetings to get your ideas passed, get people to buy into your idea. You don't want someone to have a knee-jerk reaction to something or like, we tried that, we're not going to do it again, which, you hear that a lot. A lot of times when people try things and they don't go that well, it's because it wasn't executed to its full advantage. Not every piece was thought through, or the value prop didn't align, the messaging didn't align. So just because you tried it and it didn't work before, it doesn't mean that initiative couldn't work for you, right? That's a hard part of trying to get like a CEO or a CFO now to understand that, is that things happen. You don't want to be torpedoed because your boss has that knee-jerk reaction, or some key player misinterprets something and just goes ballistic, like, we've done it, that's not going to work. Right. So, and then you don't want to also be flat footed in that meeting, that if someone's going to ask you a question and then you don't have an answer for that. So you really want to do all of these pre-meetings to get to that. Set aside some time to brainstorm and you come up with 90% of the objections that people can possibly ask you when it relates to your budget planning. That's really, really key, right? There's always going to be somebody who throws out a random question. But if you go through the effort to brainstorm possible objections, possible questions, and you come armed with those stats or facts, then people will be like, yeah, that person knows what they're talking about. Yeah, okay, that's approved. Right. But when you don't look like you have confidence, when you can't answer those questions, people are going to be like, you know what, we're not going to try anything different. People are afraid, right? Inherently, it's easier to say no to something than to really kind of open your heart and minds to something different. Marketers have to stop reporting on activities, start reporting on business outcomes. This is why I always kind of tell people that you need to align your business, your sales and marketing, or marketing and enrollment, depending what business line you're in and industry. The biggest mistake you can make are with metrics. A lot of times businesses are actually measuring too much. There's that noise, right? You got to drive yourself crazy. You suffer from data fatigue, and at the end, you're distracted from the day-to-day marketing, right? I work with a company that they produce so many beautiful reports in PowerPoint and they send them out that the team is actually spending the majority of their day on reporting, as opposed to actually deep work and trying to solve for problems. So catch yourself. What are the key metrics we really need to look at? And those are the ones that should be reported, right? And make sure those metrics align with your overall marketing strategy. I hear a lot of times that marketing is aligned on leads or MQLs, marketing qualified leads, and those don't convert necessarily all the time. And they said, well, I hit my lead quota, I'm out, right? And this is where you get like the people that say, I need more sales. Well, I need more leads. I need more sales, right? Ultimately, we need more predictable revenue. So what are you doing to align those two departments in performance goals as opposed to each one running at their own goals? Open your mind, right? Keep your budget flexible. So you really have to go into it with quarterly sprints, and I'm going to kind of cover those right now. You want to focus on agility, right? Quarterly plans have focus areas, clear defined marketing initiatives, budget, quantifiable goals, hypothesis and assumptions, and defined owners, right? So when we onboard a new client, yes, we talk through strategically their plan and we help them come up with that, but we also focus that on what are we going to do per quarter, and then how do we create them into 30-day sprints. It's easier to manage. It's also easier to pivot your strategy as needed. All right, so now we're getting to the nuts and bolts of creating that plan. One of the key elements of creating your plan is you have to do competitive reviews, right? What are your competitors doing? And then, Dave Gerhardt and Chris Walker always say there's usually a lot of inefficiencies that are overlooked with planning. So it's also really good to look at where were inefficiencies. Can you improve those conversion rates? Can you do other things that are different in your plan? All right, so you can't connect the dots looking forward, but you can connect them looking backward. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in the future. I always say past behavior is a good predictor of future behavior. So, but there's times that I'll see like, okay, I've been converting at 5% and now their goal is set to 7%. I'm like, why do you think you'll hit 7%? They're like, well, that's our goal. We're going to hit it. I'm like, that's not rooted in reality. And even if you throw out a lot of like lead nurturing and sales enablement, you haven't actually done those things yet. So it's you're bound to fail already at your planning process by creating these kind of inflated goals, because then you feel deflated when you don't hit them. What has been working, right? Which channels drive the best results? Which channels aren't performing well enough? You tried certain channels and they're not producing results. Is it worth removing them completely, cutting back on the budget, or reconfiguring? Maybe you hire an agency to help you if you can't do paid search especially well, or Facebook ads. Maybe this is the time to say, you know what? Let's see if an agency can do better for us. All right, decide on the right channels for your business. And I'm going to cover through a lot of new strategies that you may or may not have in your plan. So let's look at how we can maybe incorporate some of those new channels in there. But we do want to come in the previous slide, it says Google's mantra, do no harm. You have to identify what has been working because that's going to be the framework of your budget next year. All right, so here are some ideas on how to do competitive review. You could do an SEM Rush or iSpot TV. You start to look at what your competitors, also there's a Facebook ads library, start to see where your competitors are, how much are they running ads, to get a sense of where they are. That's really key, to see what they are, because that's going to help inform some of your future planning. All right, beware of the dark social and dark funnels. So if you haven't heard these words before, I'm going to show you how incredibly important they are, right? Okay, so I just saw somebody who has to drop off, but they're asking for the replay, which we'll have. Okay, so this is the dark social, dark funnel. So a lot of times we tie our budgeting plan to attribution. Like, hey, in marketing now, especially in digital, we could attribute so much, but what we don't realize is so much is in this dark funnel. So only 16% of the things that we can look at are attributed, that we really know where they came from, and we clearly can see that. Well, 84% of the conversations that happen and the referrals that happen are in this dark funnel where we don't have exposure. It's through text, it's through calls, it's through email. When somebody asks somebody else, like, hey, I need a new billing system, or I need a new CRM, what works for you? And they find the people that they know could give them that advice. That's all in dark social. You have no idea that's happening. And a lot of times we base our budgets on the things that we could attribute, but we're missing the mark on this big piece right here with 84%, right? So how do you create a budget when you don't have exposure to that? And that's kind of really following some fundamentals on what works, and just really kind of staying true to what works. Let's talk through the philosophy of how you should think about your budget. So there's a 70-20-10 rule, and I'm going to go through it in just a second. 70% of your budget should go into tried and true tactics. So that's where we looked back at what worked last year and how do we do more of that this year. So 70% is going to be the things that give you the kind of the bare bones of your results of your plan, right? You want to double down on these if you can. Like I mentioned, maybe you can get more out of SEO. Maybe you can get more out of certain channels if you spent more money. Do TV work for you? And those are your tried and trues. 20% are the untapped segments. So these might be things that your competitors are doing when you did your competitive research, but you as an organization haven't tried yet. If you're in higher ed, I'm going to say TikTok ads, you probably haven't tried, are killing it for some schools, and it might be something that you really want to put some money in. And that, that's more of, you don't know what you're going to have. There's some assumptions that it's going to work well for you, but it's not tried and true. So 20% of your budget should really go into this category. All right, you may be disappointed if you fail, but you're doomed if you don't try. So many companies are so afraid to try new things, and they end up not growing and scaling the way that they hoped. So that's really something important to keep aware of, is that you can't grow and scale if you don't do different. I also kind of say, if you're standing at an ocean and you're not moving, right? You're doing the same thing. The ocean is still moving out from under you. So inherently, the marketplace keeps changing even if you stay still. So think of that ground underneath you. And this is 10% of your budget should go to newer channels and testing channels. So if you haven't done YouTube ads before, this is a place to do them, or new initiatives. This is also an area of budget for you to grow your staff. You upskill your staff. You got to put money into sending them to conferences. Now there's a lot of digital conferences. You got to pay for them to have classes. You got to give them the space and time and money for them to upskill. I love this Ford quote. The only thing worse than training your employees and having them leave is not training them and having them stay. There's a lot of times we see in marketing departments, people get stagnant. They've been doing the same thing. They're all out of ideas. And this is kind of you pushing either that employee isn't right for you anymore because they're not coming back with fresh ideas, or you haven't put enough effort into upskilling them. This is something else to consider in your budget, right? Allocate a portion of your budget to existing customers. You have to earmark this money for them. It costs 5 times as much to sign up a new customer than to keep an existing one, right? So if you could reduce your attrition rate by 5%, you can increase profitability from 25 to 125%. How? Because the cost of marketing are sunk costs. We can't recuperate those costs. So if you can keep that customer staying on for much longer, then boom, right? You are more profitable. But a lot of times we spend all of our efforts to constantly churn that wheel and that funnel and get more people in that we kind of ignore our other customers. Most customers leave, 68% of them leave because they think you don't care about them. So that's just bananas. So marketing needs to take a bigger initiative to keep current customers and not just focus on the front end of the ship. And in that process of owning that, they need some budget dollars and they need some time to focus on that. Where to allocate budget to? Okay, so a lot of times people always ask, like, how much do things cost, right? So I'm going to give you a little bit of a cost. According to WebFX, designing a proper website costs anywhere from $23,000 to $175,000, right? And it costs anywhere from $400. I don't know who could pay $400, but to $100,000 in annual upkeep. If you think about the importance of your website, you're doing maybe TV ads, maybe you're doing internet ads, you're doing everything and driving them back up. Once you've done a display ad or you do landing pages or Google ads, then the person's going to type in your brand name and find you, right? But they discovered you some other way, but they're going back to your website. You have to make sure your website is a killer conversion machine. And what does that mean? How do you make it a killer conversion machine? And that's where you got to put the time and the effort to make it amazing at conversion. And if you don't feel like you have the resources to do that, you got to find companies to help you with that. But that is the number one goal for 2022 is how do you make your website a conversion 24-hour salesperson? 62% content marketing is 62% more effective and generates 3 times more leads than outbound. Outbound is paid search, paid social. So you got to do a lot more content strategy and development. And what does that look like? And I'll cover that in just a second. And you got to leave a budget line item. Nobody does this. So as an agency owner, I'm going to tell you, you got to put a big budget line item for content distribution and repurposing. If you build it, they will not come. Like you're like, well, I redesigned my website. Where are they? If you put a blog post out there, they will not come necessarily. It's how you market that. How do you get it out there? And then once you create that, how do you create it differently by turning that piece of content into a video, by turning that piece of content into multiple different things to keep encouraging people to come back. Something else that nobody really accounts for and is sales enablement. I actually like to call it buyer enablement, but it's how do you enable the buyer? How do we move someone down the process and support sales with the right pieces of material? Is it an enrollment tour? Is it different videos from your business? Is it just how do we make them a better buyer and build value? And how do we help them solve for problems, right? Nobody buys things for the sake of buying things. They're buying things to solve a problem. How is your marketing and sales enablement, like a sales support materials, helping them solve a problem and showing them how your product solves that problem, right? Then you've got like lead nurturing. Again, nobody budgets for this. And it's like, one of the most important things. If only 1 to 3% of buyers are ready to buy right now, why are we not all throwing all of our time and effort into getting more of those leads to convert long term, right? Referral gifting and campaigns, that's just something you need a line item for. You need to ask for referrals. Sometimes you have to incentivize them, or you have to create campaigns. Even if you don't incentivize them, you have to create campaigns that cost money to get more referrals. So budget for that. And you got to support customer retention, because I showed you why it was so important. And then in general, you got to do more video marketing. And I'm going to show you some of the stats, right? I've been talking so much. So I hope you're sorry, like I said, this is like drinking from a fire hose because there's so much to cover. But these are some areas that nobody puts enough money in, and it ends up strangling the business in so many different ways. IT, there's constantly constraints about IT. Oh my gosh. People always say like we can't do integrations because of IT. We can't do this because of IT. We have to solve for that. IT can't be the constraint that stops marketing from moving forward. So we got to figure out from an organization, how do we budget for that and push as a marketer or as a strategic leader in the organization, say, hey, I need IT to do a much better, we need to put more budget towards IT. I cannot have it be another constraint. Marketing technology, this is a cost that just keeps skyrocketing. So you got to plan for that. You got to plan that you're going to need new tools, new techniques. There's times that I'm like, all right, let's go send out a text message. Well, we need a new tool for that. So those are all under the marketing technology realm. You got to have a really good CRM system, all of those things, but make sure you plan for it. This is one that people do not plan for, is CRO, conversion rate optimization. Okay. That is where you get your website, where you get your landing pages, and how to make those convert better. So you're spending more money on Facebook, you're spending more money on Google, but you know what? You're probably not putting the effort to make sure that when they land on that landing page, it is going to be a conversion machine. We got to get those conversions up because the cost for media is just going up. So you have to keep testing. And sometimes you have to put 15, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 in CRO. And it's going to be worth it, but you have to budget for it. And it's one of the most important things, but overlooked in budgets everywhere. All right, content repurposing. So I kind of mentioned that people don't put enough effort and time into this, but this is where you have infographics, you have studies. I'll give you an example. For this webinar, not only do I host the webinar, we're going to then put it on replay, right? And then promote the replay, but then we're also going to cut this webinar into little snippets of like tidbits and give them back out on LinkedIn and other social media. So what we're doing is repurposing this webinar to give it a lot of leg. Outside of how many people attended today, I might get 100-fold increase in the value of this webinar through the things I do through repurposing. So it doesn't even matter to me how many people attend the actual live webinar, because I can have 10x people watch it in replay, and that actually shows to be the case. But then how do you keep repurposing this into multiple things? There's a blog post for it. There's all these different things. All right, so that's repurposing, but you have to budget for it. And it goes into the realm of content development, but it needs to be another line item of content repurposing and distribution. Okay, so we talked a lot about the value of lead nurturing, but let me show you these stats. So if you do not have a budget line item for lead nurturing, I need you to go to your CFO and your CMO and everybody else, whoever might be a hindrance to saying yes to these line items, and show them these stats. 79% of marketing leads never convert into sales. Lead nurturing emails get 4 to 10% response rate between like email blasts, just standalone. So if you're nurturing someone over time and building a relationship with them and showing them social proof and giving value and solving their pain points, you're going to convert a lot more of those leads than if you just randomly sent out email blasts as you thought of them. And leads are 9 times more likely to convert when businesses follow up within 5 minutes. Again, make sure you get that downloadable sales sheet because it has all those stats in there. All right, let's talk through the importance of video content marketing. You need video. If you leave with a couple things, you need sales enablement, lead nurturing, and video in your budget, right? So viewers retain 95% of a message when they watch it in video compared to 10% when reading it in text. Social media posts that contain a video have 48% more views. So this is where that repurposing, you still have a blog post, but now you're injecting a video into that blog post. 66% of marketers who have started marketing on TikTok have reported success. And customers are 84% more likely to purchase after watching a product video. So do more video. The importance of storytelling and marketing, especially if you're in B2B, this is often something that's overlooked. And even in higher ed, it's often overlooked the way that it should be. According to Headstream, 55% of people considering buying from a brand, they love their brand story. What is your brand story? And we have branding workshops. So if that's something that you need help refining, we could set up a workshop with you. But 44% will share their brand story with others. That's brand advocacy. If they believe in what you're doing and you've done a good job. If you ever want a good example of this, charity water, epic. how they do storytelling. And it's a full charity. It's about giving water to the folks in Africa, and they ask for donations. It's epic on their storytelling. And 15% will buy immediately. All right, so more stuff on storytelling, right? You're making an emotional connection of the why. Why should I buy your product? If you don't know why I should buy your product, they're definitely not going to know, right? So, and we're story people. We learn through story. So what is your story? And this is just something I actually added in last night when I was going through this presentation. This is the importance of branding, right? Even I'm a lead generating marketer. I'm demand gen. I have been in the lead gen space for 1,000 years. But the importance of branding is so often overlooked. We're very much in direct response now. But I wanted to show you. So in the yellow line here, is direct response, right? It's activation, it's sales activation. The branding line, look how anemic it is compared to this one, right? Immediate results. It's very anemic. And then look where it gets to after, a year, like 6 months to a year to 2 years. So for the first 6 months, your CEO is totally going to fire you because you're not having the results. So you have to do some combination of both, and it's hard to find the money to do both. But if you, even in B2B business, you have to do branding and you have to do storytelling in order to really, really grow. So this is where it shows in. It's from Marketing Effectiveness in a Digital Era. There's a great video on this on YouTube. Be sure to watch it. It's amazing. And you have to get the whole business to buy in that we can't be completely direct response. This is one of the things, a part of it is, if you look, this is kind of where I was trying to point out, it's very anemic and it's very sad and pathetic. So that's why people don't do it as much as they. If you send us an email, I'm happy to send this to you. I wanted to go ahead and kind of focus on the sales funnel for a second, right? Don't neglect to invest at the top of the funnel. You won't see the returns as quickly, but your sales funnel a year or two down the road will thank you. So these are people who aren't specifically, like if you type in a Google search and it says, I want an online degree now, that's very lower funnel, right? Upper funnel things are like, what do I do with my life? Or, or upper funnel could be a lot of other things. Like they're solving for a bigger problem and you're helping to educate them down to your solution. But this is a great funnel. And plus in here, we have a lot of different things like tip sheets, what to do at each part of the funnel to move someone down. In the consideration phase, this is the middle of the funnel. Webinars and videos and testimonials and case studies are really kind of what, once they have a better sense of what their problem is and how you're solving for it, that's when you do those things. But up here, it's more like broad range, like podcasts and, different newsletters and press releases, lead magnets, but you're not necessarily honing in on exactly your product or service. You're solving for a bigger problem and you're trying to educate them on you're naming that problem. Sometimes we don't know what the problem is or how to solve it. So you're trying to help them get, how are other people spending their marketing budget? So this is where we get to, how are other people spending their marketing budget? This is marketing budget benchmarking. It's really important to understand how much people are spending in other areas of their budget, because it's like a level set, right? If you don't know that, then you can't go back to your CEO and say, we are grossly underspending. This gives you the ammunition to know how to get more budget dollars for your business. According to the Small Business Administration, if you're making less than 5 million a year in sales, you should be spending 5 to 8% of your gross revenue for marketing and advertising. That's gross revenue, okay, not profit. Your net profit margin after all expenses is in the 10 to 12% range. But I would like to caution you and think about this. Marketing should not just be viewed as an expense, it's an investment. So some of the companies I work with really outspend this and they start to see dividends. So instead of doing this kind of, like I said, anemic spend and 8 months from now, you're still getting kind of frustrated that you haven't moved the needle, let's go ahead and see if we could spend a lot more quicker in these sprints to really kind of catapult you up. Right? It's something to think about, that if you're just doing these like small spends, you may not get where you need to go quick enough. Here are some other ones. This is from Marketo. 40 to 50% of people's marketing budgets are spent in campaign planning and content creation. 20 to 30% goes into paid advertising. 10% goes into this kind of like upskilling benefits. Another 10% goes into software and tools, and 5 to 10% in events. It's good to see the benchmarks to see how your specific business is comparing to this. And each business may spend, some companies might spend 70% of their budgets in events. And I would caution that you may want to start to reevaluate how you're spending that. Are you doing enough lead nurturing? Are you doing sales enablement? Are you doing video? Can you do more of the experience remotely to support the events that you're doing. So I would say maybe your mix needs to get reevaluated. In 2019, there was a survey that said people are spending about, like, coming up 66.8% of their budgets on digital. So just see how that compares to your budget spending. Online video, because is more than doubling in numbers and investment. So if you don't have video as a line item, or if you're not growing your line item for video, this is a good talking point to come back to your leadership and say, we got to put more money. Social media is going up, obviously, and just digital marketing in general keeps going up. So that's where people are shifting their dollars to. On average, according to WordStream, people are spending about $9,000 to $10,000 a month in ad campaigns on Google or paid search. And that really varies per business. Some universities are spending $1 million. Some B2B companies aren't spending any money on Google ads because they haven't figured out how to get it to work. So it varies, but there's probably still opportunity because those people are lower funnel folks that are actively going out of their way to search for something. 46% of their marketing budgets are content creation. So that kind of reinforced what Marketo was saying. If you're not spending a good chunk of your budget on creating blog posts and redistributing them and just content in general, then we need to talk. All right, so what social media platforms do most companies use? This is according to a HubSpot State of Digital. The beautiful thing is, most people are now spending most of their money on Instagram. It used to be Facebook just a year ago. YouTube, you could see this number is really skyrocketing. If you look even 1 year, or actually 2019, I should have had a comparison. It was very small. YouTube is still a great value because creating videos for companies is really, really hard, and it doesn't have to be, but it is. And so you can get really good value, and the majority of people spend time on YouTube. So please consider that one. And I just wanted to show that, here is where TikTok didn't even make this list of where companies are spending their money, right? But look where TikTok is. This is the amount of downloads. So they hit 1 billion downloads. It's one of the fastest growing networks out there. So you really have to think about, how are you spending your money? How do we look at your budgets? And this might be in the 20% or 10% of your budget. But if you kind of target a little bit younger of an audience, TikTok is where you really need to put some effort into. Social networks ranked by active users. So obviously still everyone uses Facebook, YouTube, WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook Messenger, and there's things you can do on Facebook Messenger like chats and stuff. So really good to kind of know where to put your time and effort. As I mentioned, there's a free download for this. And if you want to schedule a consultation, just kind of talk through a little bit of your budgeting strategy, where you're putting money, where you like to put money, let's chat. What we do as Ellison Ellery Consulting, we craft end-to-end digital experiences, and we have the technical know-how to execute them. So we are a mixture of creative and coders and everything in between, right? So we do paid media, SEO, we do content strategy and development, and sales funnels, marketing funnels, flywheels, and everything in between. And then we help set all this up in your CRM too. So if you need lead nurturing, we can help you execute that into your CRM too. Thank you for joining. I do want to leave it open if anybody has any Q&A. I'd love to be here to answer any questions, but I do want to thank you for your time. I know it was a lot to throw at you. We're going to send you some emails with the replay, but you could also just reply back to that email with your questions. So feel free to ask your questions. We are here to help in any way that we can, and we work across B2B. People always ask us, like, who do you work with? And I'm like, well, do you sell to people? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, then we work with you. There isn't an industry we don't focus on because we're ultimately connecting with humans, and humans are humans across different industries. So, well, thank you again for your time. I don't really see any questions, so we're going to drop off, give you a few minutes of your life back to start doing some of that deep work and deep thinking, and make sure you get your budget template. So that's going to be key, and we'll send that out in the email with the replay. Thank you again, and have a good rest of your day. Bye, everyone.